Welcome to the deep dive. You've handed us the source material, and we've been digging in to pull out the crucial insights, the standout points.
The surprising connections, maybe?
Exactly, everything you need to get quickly up to speed from this specific material.
Think of it like your personal guided tour. We're helping you navigate this information landscape,
Yeah.
highlighting what this particular source thought was important and, why.
Okay, so today's deep dive is all about one specific source. It's a YouTube video transcript from Sky News Australia, and the title is Lefties Losing It, Kamala Bombs with Bizarre Speech in Australia.
Right. And our mission really is just to unpack the commentary and the content presented in that transcript.
Yeah.
And as you'll see pretty quickly, it covers a really wide spectrum.
Yeah, it jumps around a lot. Political events, cultural observations.
Even like online prank videos. It's quite a mix.
Okay, let's dive straight in then. The source kicks off by focusing on Kamala Harris's recent visit to Australia. They really honed in on one specific event, her speaking engagement at a real estate conference on the Gold Coast.
Right. And the transcript gives us some details about this. It notes that attendees apparently paid quite a bit to be there.
Yeah, they mentioned figures upwards of $1,500.
Exactly. And later it specified a range, something like $900 to $1,700.
Yeah.
So, not cheap.
And the buzz, according to the source, was really around her rumored speaking fee.
Yeah.
They mentioned figures like $200,000 to $300,000 US dollars.
Wow.
With some rumors even stretching that higher, maybe $400,000, even $500,000.
Big numbers.
What's interesting is how the source highlights she was headlining alongside a pretty, diverse group.
Like Maurizio from The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills.
That's the one they mention, which, the source frames as a bit of an unusual pairing for a vice president.
Definitely stands out. So the source then dug into the speech itself, right? Pulling out specific phrases they found, let's say, noteworthy.
They did. One phrase they highlighted, and they mentioned hearing it like countless times before, was this idea of seeing what can be and being unburdened by what has been.
Okay, a familiar line, maybe?
But here's where the source suggests it got really interesting.
Oh.
They report she had this segue involving Playboy magazine covers.
Playboy? Really?
Yeah, somehow linking them to the perpetuation of the human species.
Okay. How does that connect?
Well, the transcript makes it pretty clear the source found it totally confusing, baffling even, to the audience that was there.
Right. Definitely a moment that stuck out to them, it seems.
Yeah.
Another key part of her speech the source focused on was her commentary about, like, pushing past projection.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
She reportedly said things like, I don't hear no, I eat no for breakfast.
I don't hear no until maybe the 10th time. Yeah, I saw that.
And the source lists the examples of no she apparently cited receiving in her career. It's not your time, you're not ready.
They're not ready. Nobody like you has done this. It's going to be a lot of hard work. Those kinds of things.
Right. And the commentary in the source, well, it didn't really pull any punches on this point.
How so?
They directly connected it back to U.S. politics. They stated, quote, the American people said no in emphatic fashion last November,
Okay.
and added, hopefully you've heard the message because no means no. So a very direct political interpretation coming from the source.
Okay, yeah. Very pointed.
Yeah.
And beyond the speech content, the source also detailed the security presence.
Oh, yeah. Big time. They reported the Gold Coast Highway was actually shut down.
Shut down. Wow.
Describing a motorcade, 9 unmarked SUVs, police bikes, full U.S. Secret Service detail.
So presidential-style protection, basically. Patrolling the perimeter and everything.
Even in Australia.
And this level of detail, the source seems to include it to emphasize maybe the contrast, the significance of her visit versus where she was speaking.
Could be. The source speculated that maybe this speaking circuit is her future, post-politics.
Especially since they mentioned she reportedly signed with CAA, Creative Artists Agency, back in February.
Right. And the source was, pretty blunt about their assessment of her speaking ability.
They weren't impressed.
Not at all. They offered the specific opinion that she is uniquely bad at speaking.
Uniquely bad. Strong words.
They even floated the idea that maybe Australia was being used as a kind of training ground for her, far away from the U.S. media scrutiny.
Interesting theory. And they framed the venue too, right? The real estate conference.
Yeah. The source felt that speaking there might be, quote, beneath the dignity of the office of a former vice president.
Okay.
Comparing the Gold Coast vibe more to Atlantic City than, say, Vegas glamour.
Gotcha. So given their view on her speaking skills, It makes sense they were skeptical about those high fees lasting long term.
Exactly. It all paints a very specific picture from this source's perspective.
Okay, then the source takes a sharp turn, completely different direction.
Yeah, from political analysis to something they called the Neil prank segment.
Right. This section featured a clip, some kind of prank video.
As the source described it, the premise involved pretending a young woman was dating someone they labeled a lefty losing a TD sufferer.
TD meaning Trump derangement, I guess.
That's what they said. And the idea was supposedly to annoy her parents.
Okay, so what did they highlight from the video?
Specific moments that the source found, well, absurd, like someone asking for consent before a kiss on the cheek, asking for pronouns, he, she, or they, and getting the response, them.
Them, okay.
And a staged confrontation involving a Medja hat on a Tesla with someone saying, this country is going fascist.
Wow, quite the scene. It just shows the sheer variety of stuff this source pulls together, doesn't it?
It really does, all under that lefties losing it banner.
Right, and following that, another pivot. This time looking back at the Black Lives Matter movement from about 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm. They revisited specific, widely publicized moments, mentioned Nancy Pelosi and other Democrats taking a knee.
For George Floyd and others like Bonnet Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Botham Jean, those names became symbols.
Yes. And they also referenced politicians reportedly wearing ethnic African garb.
Right, and the black squares on Instagram. The source described that as feeling kind of absurd.
Yeah, their commentary on this whole period was pretty pointed. They labeled a lot of the actions as peak virtue signaling.
Okay, do they give specific examples?
They called out Pelosi's very expensive shoes while she was kneeling and pointed out her mask was worn under the chin.
Which they also called more virtue signaling. Got it.
And their report on the outcome of that period was blunt, stating there was mass violence, arson, looting, and destruction costing around $2 billion.
Okay, a very critical assessment of that time. And they connected this to current dynamics.
Yeah, they introduced this idea that the DEI edifice, diversity, equity, inclusion, is, in their view, crumbling, or at least cracking.
Oh, okay. And their point was?
That this supposedly gives political cover and social cover for people to push back against what they see as absurdity from that period.
I see. They also recalled how the celebrity corporate class, as they put it, quickly jumped on the BLM bandwagon.
Right. And they included a specific detail about the George Floyd funeral happening when others couldn't hold large funerals due to COVID limits.
Framing it as another example of the elite operating with her own rules.
Exactly. And circling back to Kamala Harris.
Oh, she came up again?
Yeah, the source made the specific claim that she was, quote, raising bail money for thugs arrested during the BLM riots.
Okay, so this segment clearly revisits that pass through a very specific, critical lens provided by the source.
Definitely. Then another area the source touched on was Memorial Day.
Right.
Briefly mentioned President Biden at Arlington National Cemetery, quoted a bit of his speech. Every child that lives in peace does not diminish with time, it only grows. Something like that.
Okay, standard Memorial Day sentiment. But the source drew a contrast, didn't they?
A strong one. They presented the view that the military, the men and women, have been boosted by the Trump administration compared to the Biden presidency.
Boosted. What evidence did they offer for that?
They cited a huge surge in the number of people who are joining the military and improved recruitment numbers after a difficult period.
Okay. Did they say why recruitment had been difficult?
They linked the challenge of attrition partly to vaccine mandates, suggesting that caused some people to leave.
I see. And they compared figures associated with each administration.
Yeah, they presented the view that figures they saw aligning with Trump, like J.D. Vance and Pete Hegseth,
Right, commentator.
were aspirational figures, quite an upgrade compared to figures like VP Harris and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin on the Biden side. That was the source's take.
Okay, clear contrast drawn there.
Right.
From there, the source shifted focus again, this time internationally.
To South Africa, specifically Donald Trump calling out what he described as anti-white racism and violence there.
Okay. And they introduced Julius Malema.
Yeah, leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters Party. The source included specific quotes from Malema reacting to Trump.
Things like, I will never be intimidated by America. I will never be intimidated by Donald Trump.
Exactly. And demanding he should have been called into any White House meeting on it.
And the source also highlighted those controversial chants Malema has reportedly led.
Yes, including kill the boa, referring to Boers or white farmers, and kill the farmer. Pretty inflammatory stuff mentioned by the source.
So how did the source frame Trump's intervention on this?
They saw it as Trump having succeeded in shining a light on this very important issue that other world leaders have ignored.
Interesting. Did they elaborate?
They explicitly compared it to global stands taken during apartheid, but noted that wasn't happening now when, in their words, the races were in reverse.
Okay. So positioning Trump as uniquely addressing this.
This segment really emphasized the source's view of Trump as a master at shaping narratives and using the bully pulpit.
Right. And they included that detail about the South African delegation bringing golfers to the White House meeting.
Yeah, speculating it was maybe an attempt to appeal to Trump's interest in golf.
But the really fascinating part, according to the source, was an anecdote shared during that meeting.
Oh, yeah. What happened?
One of the golfers apparently told a story about his own family being impacted by farm violence, attempts to burn it down, people coming after them. And the source presented this as really powerful validation of the issue, kind of like proof, despite some media allegedly calling it a right-wing conspiracy.
So a firsthand account that undercut the dismissal narrative. How did the source react to that moment?
They expressed a bit of sympathy almost for the South African president who was there, suggesting he might not have expected that story or a video clip being shown.
Viewing it as maybe a strategic misstep on his part.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
That was the source's read on it. Okay, transitioning again. The source discussed influential atheists potentially reevaluating their beliefs.
Right, focusing specifically on Joe Rogan.
Okay, Rogan, what do they say?
They included a quote attributed to him, apparently via someone named Terence McKenna, comparing the Big Bang to the resurrection of Jesus.
Oh, how did that comparison go?
Rogan, according to this quote, found the Big Bang less believable, describing it as the entire universe was smaller than the head of a pen and for no reason instantaneously became everything.
Interesting take. And the source mentioned a report about him attending church.
Yeah, they cited a New York Post report on that.
So what was the source's interpretation of this apparent shift in Rogan? What's driving it, in their view?
They suggested he's losing faith in science because of recent events, specifically mentioning the pandemic, the lockdowns, and what they described as trans science telling children that they're born in the wrong body.
Okay, so linking it to those specific cultural and scientific controversies.
And the source then presented a more philosophical argument, claiming science hasn't really explained origins like life from non-living matter or evolution from pond scum.
Calling it highly unlikely. A classic argument against purely materialistic explanations.
Right. And the source conveyed their own strong belief that we have a soul, and their view that Rogan is sort of figuring this out now.
Okay. And they framed this within a broader idea.
Yeah, the idea that many people, particularly men, were, quote, red-pilled during the COVID era, seeing the world differently because of lockdowns, mandates, that sort of thing.
Red-pilled. Okay. And they provided background on Rogan.
I mentioned he was seen as left-leaning, backed Bernie Sanders, identified as a Democrat.
Right.
But the source claims the whole COVID period, plus media attacks on him, they specifically mentioned the horse dewormer accusations about ivermectin, changed his view.
Changed his view on what?
On the media and on what they call the scientific fraternity, which the source claimed has ideological capture and isn't always sticking to the facts.
So a narrative from the source about Rogan's disillusionment with established institutions.
Exactly. It's a clear narrative they presented.
Good.
Okay, shifting gears again. The source moved on to commentary about Bruce Springsteen.
The boss. What about him?
They described his reported behavior at recent concerts, suggesting he's kind of annoying fans by going on political rants instead of just playing the hits.
Rants? About what?
The source gave examples, concerns about very weird, strange, and dangerous shit going on out there in America, persecuting people for using their right to free speech, and claiming the richest men are taking satisfaction in abandoning the world's poorest children, those kinds of themes.
How did the source characterize these rants?
Pretty dismissively, called it an undergraduate rant, said he's too old to be this stupid,
Ouch.
and noted the audience reaction seemed limited, just a small smattering of pause, maybe indicating impatience.
And the source had a diagnosis for this.
They presented the view that it's Trump derangement syndrome, or even, in their strong opinion, a mental illness.
Wow. And they compared him to Rosie O'Donnell potentially moving out of the country.
Yeah, brought that up. And they also mentioned Springsteen's past political actions, like campaigning for Kamala Harris, performing at her rallies.
Okay, linking his current behavior to his political alignment.
And the source conveyed their opinion that celebrities like him just won't accept election results they don't like, highlighting their view that over half the country likes Donald Trump.
And arguing that probably half his own fans feel that way too.
Right. They even claimed Springsteen likely praised Trump before he ran for president, suggesting a change in tune.
Interesting claim. So a broader critique here.
Yeah, of the Hollywood elite musicians asserting that the culture is shifting away from embracing them and their views. That was the source's take.
Okay, moving back to policy now. The source discussed a Trump administration announcement.
About gender-affirming procedures, yeah.
What was the specific policy change mentioned?
That Medicaid will reportedly no longer fund these procedures for minor children.
Okay, and the source highlighted the language used.
Very much so. They described it as bold language, quoting Caroline Levitt, referring to them as barbaric gender mutilation procedures on minor children.
Barbaric gender mutilation. Very strong wording. Did they compare it to anything else?
Yeah, they mentioned the UK banning puberty blockers for under 18s.
Okay, and the source presented their argument against these procedures for minors.
Yes, based on the idea that kids can't drive, get tattoos, sign contracts, so they shouldn't decide on life-changing altering surgery.
That could lead to loss of procreative ability or pleasure, that line of reasoning.
Exactly, and the source presented a very strong view here, stating it is a crime, and should be a crime to tell a child they're born in the wrong body.
Okay, extremely strong position from the source.
They explicitly appreciated the very bold language used in the announcement, felt it accurately described the situation.
Which they see as doing enormous damage to these kids.
Yeah.
Essentially mutilating them. Clearly an issue the source feels intensely about.
No question. Finally, the source wrapped up by briefly covering a segment about Alex Stein.
Okay, the internet personality.
That's him. They described his action of confronting anti-Elon Musk protesters with song.
With song, okay. And they mentioned his personas.
Yeah, referred to him as the pimp on a blimp, the town hall terror, the #1 city council rapper in the world, those kinds of labels.
Right, and his method was described as rapping when protesters wouldn't talk to him.
Trying to out-absurd them with his performance, basically. Just another example of the source pulling in various cultural figures and events into their commentary.
Wow, okay. So this deep dive, based on just that one source, really did take us across a remarkable landscape, didn't it?
It really did. We covered, let's see, Vice President's overseas speech, security details, commentary on political figures, a look back at social movements.
Celebrity behavior, shifts in worldview around science and belief, policy announcements, online pranks. It's a lot.
All originating from the perspective presented within that one single transcript, Lefties Losing It. Our goal, as always, was just to guide you through that specific source's content.
And the particular lens, through which it views all these diverse happenings.
Yeah, what this deep dive really highlights, I think, is how a single source, like this one, can pick such seemingly unrelated events.
A formal speech, a prank video.
Right, and weave them together under one narrative thread, framing them all through their particular viewpoint.
It definitely leaves you considering the sheer breadth of topics that get connected in public discourse. And maybe, who gets to decide which threads link them and what story we're actually hearing when we see the world through just one perspective.